So welcome everyone to the CPO series where world-class chief product officers share their firsthand experiences in building products, building companies, and perfecting their craft. So I'm Christina from the Dragon Boat team here as your host for today, and I am joined by Mirela Mus, our CPO series guest speaker for the day. So hey Mirela, and hello to everyone joining.
Great to be here.
All right, so we would love to hear from you. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the little chat panel. Say hello and let us know where you're tuning in from. I am joining from Austin and Mirela is tuning in from Berlin. So we've got an international crew so far. So today we will get started soon, but I wanted to go over a couple housekeeping notes. So the first is that this will be around a half-hour session. It is a live session and this will be recorded and available on demand on our website later so that you can watch it and share it with your network if you'd like. And then we will also have Q&A at the very end. So save or enter, go with all your questions you have along the way for Mirela, and we will cover those at the end. So without further ado, we are going to get started. So as I mentioned, the CPO series is hosted by Dragon Boat, and just a quick word on Dragon Boat. We enable product leaders to accelerate outcomes with a suite of products for road mapping, portfolio management, strategic planning, and more. So check out dragonboat.io/CPO to learn more. And now I am excited to officially introduce Mirela. So Mirela is based in Berlin, and she's the founder and CPO of Product People, which is the premier destination for product management services in Europe. So with 40 in-house product management consultants, the company runs over about 100 client missions per year, from parental leave covers to urgent initiatives to advising and more. So Mirela personally serves clients from Zalando to the World Health Organization, and her background is in computer science with an MBA. So she's been doing product management for well over 12 years, half of them in a leadership role. So you're in super great hands to hear from Mirela today. So our topic is going to be on how to deliver great products faster, and I will now hand this over to Mirela to kick this off.
Super, thanks a lot, Christina. So I'll take over screen sharing. Great. Then I'll start with a bit of what happened in the last years or so. As we went in 2022 from hypergrowth and crazy low interest or zero interest times to raising interest rates in March 2022, which then created this whole funding dry up, the large number of layoffs, and the whole shift in the market that we've seen accelerating ever since that time. And it started in 2022. I'm not sharing the 22 numbers. This is only from TechCrunch up until September 2023. And just in the US, I saw lots of people here are also from Europe, so it's a mix. So only in the US, the reported layoffs are 250,000 people. So this impacted many of us working in tech tremendously. Just this one shift in the market and in funding. And the reason I'm talking about this is that we went from a mentality of growth at all costs, that it will cost virtually zero to get more money or borrow more money, into this being very expensive. Because product-led growth is not a new thing. Going to the next slide. Sorry. Product-led growth has been around for quite some time. And if you look at companies like Airbnb, they were also doing this about 10 years ago. All the tactics and this distribution model where the product sells itself by way of its features. It became more important now because there's less money to spend and companies need to be more efficient. And one way of efficient growth is PLG. And it's cost effective because you acquire customers by self-service. I know this is customer in B2C, but in B2B it was less common. We also remember how it started with enterprise sales or on-premise software and all of that, and by word of mouth, which is again a tactic mostly borrowed from consumer apps. And once you acquire customers, you can also renew this and or expand what they're buying. Let's say you're having different packaging in your products or different modules that you're selling, or you're selling more seats if it's user-based. All of that can happen if you, of course, deliver good value and your users bring in new users. And then that's what I also want to put an emphasis on, that it requires a good and strong value proposition that customers recognize, because there won't be a salesperson there to handhold them or to give them a quick discount or something if they don't see that value by themselves by using the product or the way they're onboarding on the product. What's great that if you make this transition, or when you make it and it's successfully implemented, internally inside your organization, it should also create alignment between engineering, sales, and marketing, because they all need to contribute to the product, which is the largest source of sustainable, scalable growth. This doesn't exclude having an enterprise area, as at some company size, you still need sales to iron out compliance or do some paperwork. So a lot of PLG companies successfully marry these models, where for startups or small companies, and then towards mid-size, they have everything self-service. And when you go into large enterprise, then it's worth getting a sales team on it, or with the usual perks and or ways of selling. So these two approaches don't exclude themselves. PLG is great up until enterprise due to just the nature of how things work there. And I've mentioned work, so does this really work? Do we have some data on it? This is a study by Bain conducted in 2023, where they looked at about 176 companies. The ones in blue are the product-led ones, and they are exceeding by a good percentage rule of the 40 and rule of the 50. So this means growing by over 40% or respectively 50% with more than 40% margin, which is great. And the reasons why they're doing that are some that we talked about in the previous slide, where cost is a bit reduced compared to the traditional approaches of growing, because your users bring in new users, or your users upsell themselves or self-service and renew the product, which is again easier on the company's costs. And one takeaway from this, if you want, is also focusing on outcomes, not outputs. And if we make a segue into why are companies currently not product-led, or what's preventing them from doing that, is many don't have this well set up. Many teams waste time and energy. They react to roadblocks when this happen, or they are less aligned on what to do next. Sometimes the product teams get a bit lost about what's important, or what are they all striving towards, or get disconnected from the bigger picture. And I don't know if I want to do a share of hands, but it's possible that you've seen this also in some organizations, where the vision is nice on paper, but whenever you speak with teams there, they're all confused and somewhat blocking each other. If you go on the outcome driven approach, hopefully you will deliver the right thing at the right time and escape the build trap, feature factory, which I know all PMs like to complain about. As well, the goal will be to rally the teams behind a shared vision and something that you all decide is worth doing. You will also create clarity and incentivize effective cross-team collaboration. And of course, you need to do that while also measuring progress and celebrating success. John Cutler, by the way, has had a great talk. I don't know if it's part of his articles, where he was suggesting even celebrating micro successes, like in spontaneous team meetings, not waiting for formal updates where you say, okay, we did this metric, but actually celebrating that when it happens in that, and having this continuous cheerleading and team uplift. And of course, improving and iterating. This is not like a one-time thing. You need to do it over and over again, rinse and repeat. And then I'm going to move into how different, depending at what flight level you're at, are you a CPO or a product leader, head of product, director, VP? Are you from product ops or are you a PM? What can you do to help your organization? This is by no means an exhaustive list. There are just a few ideas. I'm happy to discuss more ideas in the Q&A section. So one of the part is giving high-level visibility. How do you connect strategy with execution? Melissa Perry has also a great talk about that. And then it's connected to the book she just published about product operations, where you go, okay, we have the product strategy, but how does that tune out in practice? How do people go from these slides, from your strategy into executing them? And how do you use then product ops as a connective tissue and cadence builder, as well as harmonizing rituals into doing that? So it's definitely well worth checking. I'm happy to share the link to it. It's somewhere on YouTube. Then to also give kudos to the people hosting this at Dragonboat. They have a solution for portfolio management. You can look into it. There are, of course, other options. Some people just use Excel. It's important to do it first, and then you fine tune and find option that works for you. And then by doing that, you will also empower teams with a strategic direction and product vision. This also depends on the maturity of the team, because I know we all want to say we want to empower the team. In some cases, the teams may be a bit more junior and need more handholding. So that depends also on your specific case, what you need to do to make it work. One of the things that I'm strongly for is aligning team and individual incentives, going from promotion to bonuses and any other things that make sense in your organization towards the product area they can influence, or the product itself or the company itself doing well. And I know that in Silicon Valley, you do this with equity, but you can also do it way more granular, even at a bonus level. And there are a few CPOs I spoke with in Germany that have variable bonus comp as for their PMs based on some targets that the product needs to achieve. And I thought that it's quite clever and also a good way to incentivize commercially driven PMs who want to bring more to the company and the product. Of course, there's a whole discussion about perverse incentives and all of that. So you need to think of how do you incentivize the good things while not creating a larger downside. I alluded already to product ops, because I think for each CPO, when the organization gets large enough, you're going to need this orchestration function. In some cases, it's also called program management, or anything you like to go for it, but maybe dial down on the agile coaches. I haven't seen that working that well. So Scrum and the whole let's do agile by the book, but more figuring out how do you create a good outcome-driven culture. How do you make sure people know what they measure, what they look at, what is success, and at the same time go on a faster cadence. And I don't mean by measuring sprint velocity, more of we've planned to do that. Are we making it happen? Are we faster to market than some competitors or alternatives? That for me would be more importantly speed rather than a story point. So I don't believe in story points are useful, but that's a different discussion. So from product ops, it depends how you want to implement it in a company or how it's running there. It's sometimes brought in as a change agent. So this is point number one. It's sometimes also coaching and nudging PMs on how they should do reporting, how they should do alignment, how they should create visibility. In one of our engagement at a client that was growing, was in hyper growth and organically through acquiring other companies, we would have every other week different business units from these companies acquired onboarded on Slack, and they were having a product line doing X. And one of these companies would have a 3-pager whenever they were announcing something, other company would write a Slack message. So all of that was super it was not harmonized. Everyone just did something how they were used to. And it was very confusing for all the stakeholders involved, including other product teams, because each time you interacted with another product team, you needed to onboard into how are they doing road mapping, how are they updating things, how are they managing dependencies. So product ops was crucial there, not because maybe in some cases they didn't have the better approach compared to some other team, but just harmonizing how everyone does things, even cleaning up Slack channels and Confluence spaces and all of that. It's a tremendous advantage for a company that is starting to lose track of everything, especially in fast growth or lots of changes and reorgs. And another thing product ops can do, aside from aligning everyone, okay, these are the metrics we're looking at weekly or daily or bi-weekly, and these are all the dashboards that we've prepared for you. So like whenever an executive is curious about a certain key metric, there doesn't need to be an analyst compiling that. No, that should be just accessible to everyone, and everyone in the team, including designers and devs, should be aware of the most important metrics for the product or the company. And after they've done with that, as also part of defining playbooks and onboarding new PMs and key stakeholders on best ways of working, and then keeping that going. There's, by the way, a long talk that you can give just on product ops or what the CPOs could do. So for the PMs, then focusing on the why instead of the what, being very strong about execution and contributing to business and portfolio outcomes. I know sometimes PMs can err on one side or the other, but it's important to do right by the customer, but at the same time, capture that value for the business. Because if you create this value but don't capture it, you haven't been that successful, especially in this time of slower financing rounds and less of a willingness to pay on consumer side due to inflation and so on. And another idea would be to switch from feature-based roadmaps to OKR-driven roadmaps. You could do this also based on initiatives or strategic themes you want to pursue. Anything that kind of gets you away from pigeonholing yourself into a feature, because you may decide later, if you do more discovery, that maybe that's not the best way to solve the problem. All right, so we're 15 minutes in, key takeaway and summary, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. I see we already built up 7 questions. So on product-led growth, it got lots of attention after the free money party was over in 2022, and a lot of people working in tech also suffered as a result of companies for thinking that this is going to continue on and on and on, and running everything in a very wasteful way. And product-led growth also got attention because it outperforms the rule of the 40, and in some cases also rule of the 50, meaning over 40% growth with more than 40% margin, which is great because VCs are currently very much interested in valuation multiples on EBITDA rather than top line revenue, again, because margin and profitability has become crucial since the free money party was over. It contains also focusing on outcomes, not outputs, because it's about measuring what people do and getting them to adopt your product. And that's not easy to fake, since they won't be paying or they won't be using it. So you really need to figure out which outcomes you're pursuing. And then when you're applying this tactic, you need to find the right flight level, because there are some things you could influence as a CPO for your team. There's other things you can do as product ops. And even if you feel as a PM that your product leaders don't understand you, and so on and so forth, which are complaints that I hear very often, it's still a lot you can do by leading by example, executing very well at your own level, focusing on the why and delivering business value while paying attention to what the customer wants. And this is me, and I think I can head over back to Christina for the Q&A session.
All right, sorry guys, doing this live, getting the screens reoriented here. All right, so thank you, Mirela. It's so important to really highlight this approach, and I really appreciated hearing all the insights that you had for faster outcomes in delivery, and specifically how we can each take this back to our org from CPOs to PMs to product ops. So thank you again, Mirela. I wanted to share some resources for you. Anna will be helping to drop these links in the chat. So the first is that if you did enjoy Mirela's talk as much as I did today, I would really encourage you to connect and continue the conversation with her through her LinkedIn, or you can check out Product People to learn more about working with Mirela. And then for more CPO resources, you can of course check out our website at dragonboat.io. And then Mirela talked about responsive product portfolio management, responsive PPM. And if you want to learn more about that or get a free certification, you can go to responsiveppm.org. And then lastly, you can download your very own guide to accelerating outcomes, which is a free ebook that we have. So be sure to check these out. Then Mirela, if you can hit the next slide for me.
Mm-hmm.
You. So we will wrap up with our Q&A. I see we've got great questions, so we'll get to those in just a second. But if you're looking for a tool that helps bring to life a lot of the themes that we talked about today and implement an outcome-focused practice, Dragonboat can help with that. So through partnering with thousands of product leaders like Mirela, we know they need the right tooling for their teams to achieve their goals. So please do check out dragonboat.io/CPO to learn more. And next, Mirela, if you want to take off the screen share, we can open this up and get started with the Q&A.
Super.
All right. So the first of the questions that we have here, I believe this was when we were talking about measuring outcomes instead of outputs, but someone wants to know, what are the key metrics or indicators used to measure outcomes instead of outputs?
I don't want to start my first answer with it depends. Well, one would be, what are you measuring now? Right? So what I mean, instead of outputs, an output would be we're releasing ChatGPT integrate, right? Because now everything is like, okay, we're adding generative AI in our Q&A. That would be an output. An outcome would be we reduce 10% of customer support queries, or we've increased the utilization, we've increased, weekly active users by X%, but with the release of this or that. So you will see the difference. It's like one thing, I'm just going to do a thing, whereas with the outcomes, you say, this is the result that I'm going to have, and the thing that you do may change. And going from that one, it allows you also to change your mind if you figure out that maybe your product didn't need this integration with generative AI. Now you don't need to just generate copy everywhere, right? Maybe there's a different approach that works better, or a more cost-effective solution, and so on.
Awesome. That is helpful. Thank you. So the next question is, how do you ensure cross-functional teams remain aligned with the company's goals while still having autonomy?
I can give an example where I felt this worked very well from two companies of different sizes. So Omio is a multimodal travel app. I know it's more popular in Europe than in the US, because in Europe, each country has its own public transit and so on. So if you ever travel, even in Germany and change cities, you need to install another app, which is ridiculous. Whereas in this app, you can buy buses, trains, even flights. This was or something we did in 2019, and it also routes everything nice for you, ground and air and everything. So there are about 400 people, Series C, and they work with this system of priorities. Of course, there was a North Star metric and also a sanity metric close to it. North Star metric was gross merchandise volume, so all the bookings, and the other one was the number of bookings, because flight with Qatar Airways, that's a K, 1K, has a different impact on the booking revenue compared to a €7 bus ticket. So that's why they had also the number of bookings to just control for these numbers in case people decide to buy more flights, and then this screws up the numbers. So aside from this, they had let's say strategic themes. Let's say, okay, we want to enter these markets. We're going towards expanding the customer experience in these sectors and so on. And then there was a level of priority company-wide. So you had P0, which was everyone needs to do it. There's no discussion. It comes a bit top-down, and it could be compliance-driven or a company rebrand. Second one was P1, that would be more on a business line level. So each director would decide these ones, and everyone in their team will adapt to it. And then you had your P2s that were your team's priorities. Same system we've used at Zalando, which is the European Amazon of fashion and cosmetics and everything and anything. And it also worked quite well there. We were in a smaller business unit that focused on fashion inspiration, so less e-commerce straight on buying, but it was the same. There was a P0, no discussion. P1 was director level, and the initiatives that our business unit drove within the whole corporate. And then there were the local priorities. And I can't say that everyone was happy. Of course, the devs complained that also for their promotion cases, they needed things that they drove themselves. And you can't do much with working on P2s unless that really makes an impact on the numbers. But it's giving alignment, and it did help untangle a lot of the blockers and finish off some discussions sooner.
Awesome.
And I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we have maybe time for one more question. I see some themes in the question, so if we want to take one more, I'll kind of group them together. But it seems like a couple people are wondering at the very last part, how can we take this back to our orgs with each respective team? So someone is asking, for example, if we were to put CPOs, product leaders, and product ops into a Venn diagram, let's say, how could each of those teams be really outcome focused? And then additionally, what role does the rest of the executive team play in this transformation to outcome driven?
Okay, that's a bit of a complex question, and the Venn diagram, I would actually need to draw it to be able to visualize it myself. For the how do we take it back to our team, I like the advice I've heard that from Teresa Torres on how they should start with continuous product discovery is meet people where they are. If you feel that your business is very disconnected from what you want to do there, maybe there are like some small things you can bring in, disguise them as a language that they understand. For example, if you talk with founders and tell them how we want to do product discovery, we've had pushback a lot of times because they were like, yeah, but this will slow you down. I already know what you should build. Please do it. Whereas if you say, I'm doing due diligence on this, but things are still going, the dev team is like fully utilized, we have this plan and so on, then you won't get that much pushback, right? Because they don't feel like you're holding up everyone. And it's not the by the book approach, but you're removing a blocker. You may find something interesting, and you've also adapted to the person who can fire you and given them an explanation for what you're doing. So I would say, like, don't go announcing like this crazy change in our new shiny process, because if the organization has been burned to some of those, do small things that are helpful for them. Understand also what are their internal incentives. What is their department or their boss prioritizing, what's frustrating them and why, and so on. And then work your way from there. My best suggestion would be also leading by example, while at the same time trying to loop people in and make them not too scared of changes, because then you're going to just get the immune system reaction of the organization.
Yeah, there is no one size fits all, and we could probably go on for days about all of this. But thank you so much for sharing these insights. We didn't have time to get to the rest of the questions, but you can contact Mirela or contact Dragon Boat for any other questions that you still would like to hear about. But this is going to be it for our CPO series webinar for today. So thank you again to our guest Mirela for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next series. Thank you, everyone, and take
Cool.
care.
Thanks a lot. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. Ciao, ciao.